Hello and welcome back. My name is Dr. Christopher Gennari, and this is the Great Big History Podcast. History 101, Episode 17, The Ancient Hebrews, Geography and Culture. So the ancient Hebrews are a Canaanite people on the move. That's kind of where they enter history during the Bronze Age collapse, looking for a new homeland. The most famous version of this is the Exodus story, which many of you know, the Moses story, which one Cambridge archaeologist calls, at best, a refracted memory of earlier expulsions of Levantine people. Levantine are the people from the Levant, the eastern coast of the Mediterranean. It's a remembered event, like the Trojan War, written down 500 years after it was supposed to have happened. And it was itself written as a response to being enslaved in Babylon. But it has in it this memory of being on the move, of searching for a homeland. The place that they will eventually settle down is between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. It's east of Egypt, southwest of Babylon. The advantage? It's east of Egypt and southwest of Babylon. It's not near them. There's a Sinai desert separating them from Egypt, and there is the coast of Lebanon. There's Phoenicia, there's Syria, there's the mountains, and then there's half of the Tigris and Euphrates separating them from Babylon. So they have safety. It's also an arid land. There's not much really there, which allows for peace, because no one else really wants it. Are there other Canaanite-speaking tribes in the area? Yes. So is there always war? Yeah. But also, you're not being squashed by someone who is way bigger than you, way more powerful than you, like Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia, on the other hand, is the center of just a tough neighborhood. People fighting all the time. And then you end up with Babylon. So how do you fight Babylon? Cana, on the other hand, where the Hebrews will settle, is far away from everything. So it's got safety. It's got peace. The disadvantages are kind of the opposite of the advantages. It's right in the middle of Egypt and Babylon. So they're far away from the two. So as long as Egypt and Babylon never get into a fight, you're safe. But what happens if they do get into a fight? Well, they're not going to fight in Egypt, and they're not going to fight in Babylon. They're going to fight right in the middle, and that's you. The most famous of these battles that are going to be fought there is the Battle of Megiddo, where we get the concept of Armageddon from. The battle that will become the Battle of Armageddon. Why? Because the ancient Hebrews looked at this battle that was happening between Egyptians and Babylonians in their homeland. These 20,000-man armies slamming away at each other, and they said, that's what the end of the world has to look like. This is crazy. This is what it has to look like. The other disadvantage is it's an arid land, so it's poverty. There's not much trade, there's not much water, right? Babylon is between two giant rivers. Egypt is on the biggest river in the ancient world. The Jordan River is not that important. The Dead Sea is a dead sea. It's too salty to drink. So there's not much trade. There's not much natural resources. There's not much water. So the Hebrews are our first small middle power. We don't talk much about the Phoenicians, but they're to the north. They're in what today is Lebanon. So they're right to the north if you're watching the video of the circle. They concentrate on long-distance ocean-going trade. So they're richer. Egypt has the food. Babylon has manufacturing. The Hebrews don't really have all that much. So they are our first peoples that have problems when they get started. How do they have the problem of how do they live surrounded by neighbors that are more powerful than they are? And since they can't win politically, they can't win militarily, they can't win economically, the Hebrews will center on culture. They will invest their social energy in developing a culture that separates them from other peoples. So, what is Hebrew culture? Well, it's Mesopotamian. I mean, even today we use the word to describe someone who's anti-Hebrew, anti-Jewish as anti-Semitic. Well, Semitic is the language group of ancient Mesopotamia. There are 2 Semitic languages today, Hebrew and Arabic. All the others have died out, but it's related to the other languages of Mesopotamia. So they're Mesopotamian with these Babylonian influences that are especially after the Babylonian captivity. After the Judean kingdom is destroyed and hundreds of thousands of people are carted off to slavery in Babylon in 586, they're going to pick up, as you would expect, Babylonian concepts. And so Noah is a character that's in Gilgamesh. Now, remember, Noah is written 2,000 years after Gilgamesh is written, so there is lots of cultural connections. The Code of Hammurabi, which is 2,000 years as well, or 1,500 years as well, before the law codes will be written down, are likewise in the Talmud. And so we see this in law and temple design and language. We see this in the stories, right? There is a Tower of Babel story. And so Babylon is very much on the minds of ancient Hebrews, as it should be. It's one of the big 2 powers, along with Egypt. And after 586, you're enslaved there, so you have to deal with them. But despite being Mesopotamian in culture, they have a tight political alliance with Egypt. Why? Well, because they're right next door to Egypt. To their south and to their west is the Sinai Desert, which gives access, if you can cross it, to Egypt. The Egyptians don't want to be invaded, which means they need to have a border with the Sinai Peninsula, with the Sinai Desert, which means the people on the other side of that desert, i.e. the Canaanites, are the first rest stop if you leave Egypt. But they're also the last rest stop for anyone who wants to invade Egypt. Well, if you're the Egyptians, you want that place, that rest stop, to be a friend. And the Hebrews do too, because the Egyptians don't want to own them. The Egyptians just want to know, is anyone coming to invade us? So the deal is pretty much very simple. Egyptian Pharaoh will say, I'll help protect you, and you try to guard the entrance to my border. And so everyone gets something out of it. So despite the Hebrews being Mesopotamian in culture, they're more tightly allied to Egypt, who's more likely to protect their political integrity. The problem is the Sinai Desert allows a weak pharaoh to stay in Egypt. So a Canaanite king, a Hebrew king, could go, hey, Egypt, these guys are coming, come and help us. And if you have a weak pharaoh, he'll go, yeah, that's bad for you, but maybe they won't cross the desert. And so, while there's this tight political alliance, it's always subject to problems. Number 3, they begin to separate themselves out from other Canaanite people, because there are other Canaanite-speaking peoples, and the idea is there's a mess, really, a mixture. Since they speak the same language, they're easy to move from group to group, and what keeps you from being subsumed by one of the other Canaanite-speaking peoples? Think of the Latins, Latins. These people of central South Italy Well, there were like 75 different Latin cities. Which one do you care about now? Rome. That's it. Rome absorbed all the other ones and made them Roman. So what happened to those other Latin-speaking peoples? They all became Roman. Well, the Hebrews don't want to become someone else's Latins, right? So they want to separate themselves out, keep their social identity, keep. Yes, they're related to their Canaanite cousins, but also they don't want to be absorbed by them. And so they start to do things that separate themselves out. The first is diet. These are not in a particular chronological order. These are just in ways that you might know. The first is diet. They're not going to eat pigs. Why? Well, pigs were the first domesticated animal for food in the Middle East. And anywhere, actually. But everybody in the Middle East, everyone in Southwest Asia, ate pigs. Everybody. And if you're Italian and have Jewish people in your family, or you're Jewish and you have Italian people in your family, you know how big pork can be. This is a big reason why St. Paul had trouble converting the Romans in the early days. He'd show up, say, hey, you Italians, you Greeks, wouldn't you like to get to heaven? People say, sure. How do we do it? They're like, well, first thing you have to do is not eat pig. And they're like, yeah, no, that ain't gonna work. Nope, 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 nope. And so St. Paul is going to jettison that. He's going to jettison this next part too that we'll talk about. But he jettisons that kind of Hebrew Jewish requirement of not eating pigs. But one way you separate yourselves out from other people is by saying, I don't eat what you eat. I eat differently. I eat less. I eat, quote unquote, better. So while people will say, like I'll have students who will go, well, the Old Testament says that pigs are dirty. And it's like, yeah, like the same way that my vegan friends tell me how eating all meat is cruelty. It's a way of saying we don't do something everyone else does, and this makes us better. It's a justification. And so that's not to say it's bad. It's just to say the justification follows the behavior, rather than the justification comes before the behavior. Because everyone else ate pig and that didn't matter. And in fact, Jewish people I have plenty of Jewish friends, eat bacon, eat pork chops, don't keep kosher. And they have not died from eating pig. It was a domesticated animal everybody else ate. So it was a way of separating oneself out. The second way they do it is by male circumcision. That means cutting the bippy off your bippy. The idea is that this is the sacrifice that the Hebrews will have to give to their gods. And more importantly, to their one God. And the idea of this is very simple. It's not animal sacrifice. It's not child sacrifice. Some Phoenician gods and Hittite gods wanted, human sacrifice. Everybody, all the other gods want animal sacrifice. And this was a way of being, again, different. Of showing that you have a different relationship with your gods. And there will be a religious justification for this. And there's a whole story with Abraham. And then it's reinforced by the Moses story of why they do this. But what is circumcision is when boys are born, they have a protective sheath of skin on their penis. Jewish people cut that off. Muslim people do too. And in fact, the Anglo world does. Americans, Brits, Canadians, Australians. It's in the Anglo world, it goes back to the Victorian period, but really starts up in the 1950s as a hygiene, a thing you do for being more hygienic than other people. So if you're a white American male, you're almost certainly circumcised. If you're an African American male, you're 85% likely to be circumcised, because that's 85% of African American men are. If you're a Hispanic man, it depends on when your family came to America. If they've been here 400 years, like the Mexicans of Tejas, you're circumcised. If they're more recent immigrants, especially from Central or Northern South America, you're less likely to be. But this was a way of offsetting sacrifice. The Jewish God, as we'll talk about, the Hebrew God, I should say, because they're not yet Jews yet, but the Hebrew God does not want animal sacrifices like all the other gods. And so the idea was, well, you have to give this God something for your relationship. And so it's going to be the male foreskin. And the final way they're going to separate themselves out from other Canaanite people, as you may have indicated already, and you obviously know, is going to be religion. And in religion, that's going to be a major change. That's going to be the thing that separates the Hebrew people out, not just from Canaanite people, but from all other people of the ancient world. So religion is where they will separate the most from the other Canaanite peoples and the other people of Southwest Asia, of Mesopotamia. But they don't go right into what you well know is monotheism, of having one God. They go through a process. And that process starts with polytheism. Everybody starts as polytheist. Many gods of nature or of the territory. This is Abraham before meeting the Yahweh coming out of the desert. Then we have a system called Monolatry. This is the in-between system. This is Moses. This is Abraham. This is the non-prophets, where you have the right God. We've got the right God. Singular. We have the right God. But other gods exist. The Babylonian gods exist. The Egyptian gods exist. They exist in Egypt. They exist in Babylon. But they're not the right God. And they're not the all-powerful God. But that's monolatry. And you know that's Moses. Because read your first commandment from the Ten Commandments. Thou shalt have no other gods but I. I am the Lord thy God. Thou hast put no other gods before me. Well, you don't need to say that if there are not other gods. Take a look at the first pillar in Islam. First pillar, right? There's one God, Allah. Muhammad is the prophet. Done. Why? Because there aren't any other gods. Well, for Moses, there are other gods. They're just the wrong gods. That's called monolatry. But then we get to, after 500 years, monotheism. One God, only one God exists. All other gods are figments of a people's imaginations. They don't have any power. They don't exist. Now, this is a long process. It takes 500 years of monolatry to kind of get to monotheism. And in that time, you needed trauma and the prophets to come along to talk about why you should only have one God. That's your Jeremiah's, that's your Isaiah's, your Ezekiel's. So what monotheism does is transform the divinity from human to transcendental. Greek gods are human. They're superhuman, but they're human. Egyptian gods are human. Now they're portrayed as part animal and part man, but they're people. Babylonian gods are human. Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, is not human. This God has no body. This God has no form. It can take any form. It can be anything it wants to be. It is not man or a woman. It is man and woman. It's transcendental. It is all things at all times. And it is nothing at no time. And so a transcendental God is not bound by the laws of existence, which means this God acts better than people. It's more moral. This God does not have sex. This God does not do drugs. Right? If you know your Nicene Creed about Jesus, Jesus is begotten, not made. Whereas other divine children of gods were made through sex between the God and humans. Jesus isn't. This God does not do drugs. whereas Dionysus did a lot of drugs, drank, giant lakes of wine. This god is more powerful, omnipotent, more knowledgeable, omniscient, knows everything, is more powerful, omnipotent, is all powerful, can do everything. As the old kind of joke goes, is God so powerful that he could create a rock even he can't pick up? And the answer to that is yes. And then God picks up that rock. And you go, but he can't pick up the rock. You go, God can do all things. So he can build one and goes, whoa, I can't even pick that up. And then he could pick it up. This Yahweh, this God of the Hebrews, is not bound. Transcendental gods are not bound by the laws of existence. They are above them. They are beyond them. What we call miracles, if you're a good Christian, you know your miracles, you know your saints' miracles. What is that? That is breaking the laws of physics. So you could see how a god or representative of a god, someone with godlike powers, whether it's Jesus or a saint or whatever, bends the world of physics, the rules of physics, to create a miracle. Lazarus was dead, now Lazarus is alive. That's breaking the rules of physics and biology. Right? Curing the sick, feeding the multitudes, turning water into wine. All of the miracles are proof of one's godlike powers, but they're all the same thing. They all break the laws of existence. Everything you knew is wrong because the transcendental gods are not bound by these rules. So this creates an issue. And whether it's good or it's bad is kind of besides the point. It's both good and bad. But these gods are unknowable. You can't negotiate or interact with polytheistic gods. And this is a totally new, you cannot negotiate or interact with a transcendental god the way you interacted with polytheistic gods. Polytheistic gods you could sacrifice to, you could negotiate with, you could make deals with, you could have sex with. The transcendental God, you can't. This is totally new. As Graham Greene wrote in Bride and Rock, you can't conceive, my child, nor can I, or anyone, the appalling strangeness of the mercy of God. Yeah. And that's new. The advantage of polytheism is you can understand what the gods want because you can understand them. They were people. Yahweh, the Hebrew God, a transcendental God, is beyond all that. So there is no negotiating. There is no interaction. When you say a prayer, if you've ever done this, please God, help me get an A on the test, and I promise. This God doesn't care. You can't promise. That's your polytheism. That's your deep down 150,000 years of polytheism that's rooted in you coming out. You're trying to negotiate with a God who doesn't negotiate. Because you can't understand this God. As a side note, and it's important that we talk about this, Yahweh, Jehovah, and Allah are just different names for the same being. Yahweh, which is the kind of name we use for the Hebrew version of this God, is I am who am. There's also a translation that is I am who created what exists. Jehovah, which is the Christian version of this God, is a Christian transliteration of Yahweh into Latin. And Allah is a contraction of Al-Ilah, meaning the God. Well, the Arabs are polytheists. They kind of go from polytheism right into monotheism. And so it's like, well, which God? And it's the God. I'm sorry if my Arabic was terrible. These are different names for the same being. They're just the Hebrew God, the Christian God, the Muslim God is the same being. It's just a different understanding. Humans just have a different understanding of who that being is, but it's the same being. So when you go up to the big party in the sky and you run into anything with a name tag that says, "Hello, my name is Yahweh Jehovah Allah," that's God. So monotheism has several principles that you have to understand that ancient people understood. One God controls everything, which means this one God cares about everything. Remember, in polytheism, you have one God who controls the river. So what does that God care about? Sacrifice. In monotheism, you have one God controlling everything and one God thus caring about everything, which means there are rules about everything. Take a look at your 10 Commandments. They're all over the place. There's not stealing. There's being kind to your parents. There's what day to worship on. There's which God to have. And then there's, don't cheat on your wife. Right? They're kind of all over the place. And they group into little groups, that's true. But that's not polytheism. This is totally new for people. So there's rules about everything, which means there's punishment for everything. And punishment in every different way. Remember we talked about punishment in the law for nomads, which was basically your reputation? Well, this could be punishment in all kinds of ways. It could be individual punishment. It could be group punishment. And so there are rules on, do you cut your hair? Yes. There are also rules that say, no, don't cut your hair. There are 40 rules about sex, who you can have it with, who you can't have it with, when you can have it, when you can't have it. There are 40 rules about food, what you can eat, how you eat it, what you don't eat, when you don't eat it. There are rules about debt. There are rules, and the biggest rules are about not changing the rules. Why? Because God doesn't make mistakes. Because Yahweh, I know I go between the two, and that's a Judeo-Christian centrist in me. I'm sorry. That's that tradition. I want to be specific on which God we're talking about, and this is Yahweh. Yahweh does not make mistakes. So you can't change the rules, because if you change the rules, you're saying I am better than Yahweh. So there are rules saying don't change the rules. You'll see that this is a problem. All of these rules. Because ultimately, you can't follow all these rules. They're contradictory. This is why when people say, oh, the Bible is literal, you have a huge problem with those people. Because it's not. It's books written at different times by different people for different audiences that were eventually put together. They contradict each other. There are rules that say do this and rules that say don't do that, the exact same thing. Which one is correct? You don't know. And in some cases, it's impossible to know. Monotheism has several advantages. Yahweh loves you. You have an emotional connection. See Exodus. Exodus says, I am going to help my people. It's a total story about Yahweh being like, I love you people. Moses is my man. I'm going to help you. This is different than polytheism. Polytheism doesn't have gods who love you. They might like you for a time, but they're gods. They're people. They don't care. They want their sacrifice. That's what they care about. Yahweh, on the other hand, has an emotional connection to you. He cares about you, which is huge. But think about that. Think about how big the universe is. Think about how many grains of sand there is. Think about how many animals there are. Think about how many people there are. Think about how many planets there are. Think about how many stars there are. And think about the entire universe. And what does the maker of all of that care about? You. You little, insignificant nothing. You who will be lucky to live 100 years in the vastness of the universe, which is nothing. Our planet is billions of years old. Our universe is tens of billions of years old. Stars grow and die in billions of years. And you're nothing. In the vastness of time and space, you are nothing. It's why I never became an astronomer, and why people like Carl Sagan did become astronomers. They're like, this is the vastness of this, and I'm in it, and I can witness it. But this is the great advantage. In all of that, the maker of the universe cares about you. You significant, insignificant, nothing. But that makes you somebody, because it makes you special. You are the chosen people. You are the chosen person. You are by definition the best, most moral people in the whole world. Why? Because the creator of the universe picked you to be his people. Her people. Its people. Their people. And this is good for a poor, insignificant people in Southwest Asia who are stuck between the richest people in the world and the most advanced people in the world. They're the chosen people. They're special when everything in the world tells them that they're not special. So that's legitimacy. It's legitimacy for a small, poor, technologically behind people in comparison to Babylon, Egypt, the Hittites. Well, the Hittites are gone. But compared to Mesopotamia, compared to Egypt, compared to the Greeks later on, much less the Romans later on. This is their legitimacy. It will be one of the pillars of how the Hebrews survive survive the ancient world and then survive into the medieval and then modern world. Now, changed. They're not the same. That's why I use Hebrew for the ancient peoples. But the Babylonians don't survive. The Assyrians don't survive. There are people who call themselves Assyrian. They're different peoples. Like, they survive in a world where lots of people don't survive, are destroyed, are assimilated, are obliterated from war and famine and pestilence. That's an incredible power. So why isn't everybody in the ancient world monotheist? Well, because the disadvantages are huge. The first is when Yahweh is mad at you, you got problems. There is no one to go to. There's no one to ask for help. See Jeremiah, see Ezekiel. Here, Jeremiah 15. We'll go to 15:5. For who shall have pity upon thee, O Jerusalem? Who shall bemoan thee, and who shall go aside to ask how thou dost? Thou hast forsaken me, saith the Lord. Thou hast gone backwards. Therefore I stretch out my hand against thee and destroy thee. I am weary with your repenting. Dude, when Yahweh gets mad, there's nowhere to go. There's no appeal. There's no other God to save you like Odysseus has Athena to save him from Poseidon. No. Jeremiah spends his entire book talking to Judah about how bad things are about to get. Ezekiel does much the same. The second problem is, who knows what Yahweh wants? Yahweh doesn't spend a whole lot of time coming to people and speaking to them the way polytheistic gods do. And right from the beginning, from Moses, it breaks into two groups. The prophets, of which Moses is one. So Moses gives legitimacy to the prophets. These are special people selected by Yahweh to bring the laws, to bring knowledge, to bring aid. Do you follow the prophets? Moses was one. Or do you follow the priests, whose job it is to understand, to disseminate, to regulate the laws, to know what Yahweh wants? That's their job. They're trained to do so. They're instructed to do so. They're educated to do so, and to help people understand. So from the very beginning in monotheism, in a fight that doesn't exist in polytheism you get the priests. And their job is to know what the gods want. But because there's only one God, and this God can speak to whoever this God wants to speak to, you get this fight between prophets and priests. And that is Jesus' fight. Jesus doesn't fight with the Romans, the occupiers. He fights with the priests. John the Baptist's problem is also with the priests and the government authority. It is the conflict between professionals and amateurs. The priests are the professionals. The prophets are the amateurs, right? Moses is an amateur. He has no education in religion. He doesn't even really know he's Hebrew when Gabriel comes to him. John the Baptist doesn't. Jesus doesn't. That's why there are the stories about Jesus being preternatural at knowing all the laws, even though he's a child. But he doesn't have any training. He's a carpenter's son, which means he's a nice blue-collar, middle-class kid. Right? These are amateurs. The prophets of the Old Testament are the same. The priests, on the other hand, are professionals. It's between study, where you study the laws and you study the word and you study the history, versus revelation, where God speaks to you, comes to you as a dove, comes to you as a pillar of fire, comes and speaks to you as a burning bush. It is the tradition, it is the fight between the traditional institutions and the new, the group versus the individual. The priests are a group, literally a group. Whenever they're referred to in the New Testament, they're referred to as a group. The Sadducees, the Pharisees, right? But John the Baptist is John the Baptist. He's an individual. Ezekiel, Jeremiah has an entire book, Jeremiah. It's not, we don't put them all together and call them the prophets. It's Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah. And so we live in a world where the prophets have won, because we live in a world where Christianity has won. And Christianity, following Jesus, believes in the prophets, right? Jesus' big fight is with the priests. The priests get destroyed with the destruction of the Second Temple by the Romans, so they kind of lose their legitimacy, and Christianity wins, and so the prophets are elevated. Then when Christians made the Bible, and they put all the Jewish books together, and they put new Christian books together, which Jewish books did they pick? They picked the ones that emphasized the prophets, that the prophets were right. There's plenty of other books that the Christians left out. They didn't put every Jewish book into what became the Bible. They picked the ones that emphasize, like Isaiah, that something is coming, that a super prophet is coming. And so the Christians could always point to and say, look at all this stuff. It all leads to Jesus. Remember how we talked about time leading up to zero? That's the way the Bible is organized. It leads up to, boom, Jesus. God makes the rules. Here's a third disadvantage. God makes the rules. That's a problem. Why? Do the rules change? Does society change? Is God happy if the rules change or society changes? If yes, then what do the laws mean? Which changes to the laws are right? Who knows what God, Yahweh, wants now? And if no, if Yahweh is not happy with the changes, what happens? Punishment? Disaster? Stagnation? Are you supposed to stay the same and never change? That's, again, a problem. Whereas Hammurabi's going to say, I make the rules. I'm inspired by the gods, but I make the rules. They're my rules. The gods are on my side. They support me, but I make the rules. These rules, the rules of Leviticus, come to Moses via God. And so in West Wing, there's a great episode very early on that has this. And if we were to do this in class, we would show this piece. But it's Toby, a Jewish character, goes to his rabbi, seeking moral fortitude in a decision that they're trying to make. And so he says, Toby, the Torah doesn't prohibit capital punishment. Rabbi, no. Toby, it says an eye for an eye. Rabbi, you know what it also says? It says a rebellious child can be brought to the city gates and stoned to death. It says homosexuality is an abomination and punishable by death. It says men can be polygamous and slavery is acceptable. For all I know, that thinking reflected the best wisdom of its day. But it's just plain wrong by any modern standard. Society has a right to protect itself. It does not have the right to be vengeful. It has the right to punish, but it doesn't have the right to kill. And here is the fight between what is called the living law, what, if I understand it correctly, is called positivism in legal philosophy, versus the natural immutable law, that laws never change. And what Toby is saying is, the Torah says these are the laws. And the rabbi is like, yeah, and they worked then, but society changes. And the laws should change to meet that society. The problem with God making the laws, with Yahweh making the laws, is that society begins to change almost immediately, generation upon generation. And so the farther away you get from the original laws, the more divorced from the laws society will be. By definition, being born and living will break some of those laws. Which is the problem I have philosophically with people who go, homosexuality is an abomination. It says so right here. And it's like, yes, but you ignore all the other laws that surround it. You can't pick just one. You can't pick one and say, God said this, because that wasn't just the only law. Yahweh said lots of stuff that you ignore because they're inconvenient, because you don't want to follow them. In fact, you can't follow all the laws. There are 611 commandments. There's a book that came out about a decade ago about My Year of Living Biblically, where the guy tried to follow all of the 611 commandments in the Old Testament. And he's flat out says, you can't do it. It is impossible to do. You couldn't do it back in the day either, because they weren't written all at the same time. They weren't written in any kind of format that was said, okay, this, then this, then this, then this. All right, we've got it. They're over a long period of time, and society changes. But that means you're always breaking the law, and is Yahweh mad at you? And the final disadvantage is Job. The problem of Job. That Job is a good person. In fact, the first thing Yahweh says is, look at Job. He does everything right. He's perfect. And that's incredibly important, because you have to understand Job is good. Job doesn't break the law. Otherwise, you would say he got what he deserved. And at the very beginning, the brilliance of the Job writer is that the writer says, Job is good. Job hasn't broken any laws. And just so you know, Yahweh is telling you that. So Job is dealing with the philosophical problem monotheism has that polytheism doesn't. Why does bad things happen to good people? This is the fundamental problem of monotheism. See, in polytheism, there are evil gods who do evil things. It's not an issue. Philosophically, you go, well, an evil God did something evil to you. He stole your keys. He killed your baby. I mean, it sucks, but that's what an evil God is meant to do. A monotheistic God who's supposed to be good, or at least just, will follow the covenants and follow the laws. What happens then? Why does this God allow evil to exist in the world? And why does this God allow evil to happen to good people? And I'm not talking like there's a bad person who chooses to be bad, like a school shooter. Like you could say, oh, that person chose to be evil. No, I'm talking like leukemia in 3-year-olds. If there's a just God, should leukemia exist for 3-year-olds? Is there anything that a 3-year-old could have possibly done to break any law to deserve leukemia? Have you ever seen that disease? No. The answer is no, in any just universe. An all-powerful being allows leukemia to exist. Why? I don't know. I can't answer that question. Go back to Graham Greene we talked about earlier. But it is a problem in monotheism that polytheism doesn't have. Is God just? Polytheism doesn't ask that question. Polytheism says the gods aren't just. They're selfish. They're people. They suck. Monotheism starts out the opposite. God is great. Gives us chocolate cake. So what is God's morality? What is the morality of monotheism? This is the fundamental problem of monotheism, is morality. Is God just, or is it just a question of power? That might makes right. God does what God does because God can do it. That's huge. And that is a philosophical problem that we have been dealing with the entire time in monotheism. As a side note, in Job demands, having been reduced to awfulness, having his friends tell him, Job, you're wrong. God doesn't punish people for no reason. You did something terrible. He says, no, I didn't do anything wrong. I will accept whatever punishment I earned, but I want Yahweh to come here and tell me what I did. And Yahweh appears. Yahweh appears as a whirlwind, i.e. power, and gives its longest speech in the entire Old Testament. It's like 140-something lines. And here's the thing. That speech is totally about power. That speech is not about justice. Job has asked about justice. What did I do wrong? And Yahweh talks about power. Who are you to question me? I didn't think to ask you when I separated the light from the darkness. Were you there when I created the land from the sea? I'm sorry. What were you doing when I was freeing you from slavery in Egypt? Were you even... What? I didn't realize I had to ask your permission. It is 142 lines of Yahweh trying to overwhelm Job with power. And it is the last time Yahweh appears as a character in the Hebrew Bible, in the Hebrew texts. The last time Yahweh, who has been all over, hanging out with people, from Adam, from what, Genesis 1, Genesis 2, Genesis 1, all the way through prophets, through disasters, through wars, through slavery, through famine, through punishments, through renaissances. It's the last time this Yahweh appears as a character in essentially their own book. Because you could read the Hebrew Bible, the Bible in general, as a biography of God, biography of Yahweh. or Jehovah. And this is not unnoticed in the popular culture. In Josh Ritter's song, The Thin Blue Flame, he sings, "If God's up there, he's in a cold, dark room. The heavenly hosts are in a cold, dark moons. He bent down and made the world in 7 days, and ever since, he's been walking away." Tony Kushner, in Angels in America Perestroika, has the Angel of America say, "He began to leave us. Bored with his angels, bewitched by humanity, he would sail off no knowing where. Absence follows absence. April 18th, 1906, in that day, the King of the universe, he left and did not return." This monotheism asks the question, which is scarier? An angry, all-powerful God, or an unjust God who doesn't follow their own rules? Or, maybe worst of all, an apathetic one who has walked away, a silent one who doesn't hear prayers, doesn't answer them. The book of Job raises all of these questions. Polytheism doesn't care. Polytheism doesn't have to deal with any of this. They just have to make sacrifices, cross their fingers, and hope for the best. Monotheism is hard. And that's where we're going to leave. Thank you.